So, welcome. Hello. Today we're going to talk about Stellarium, however you want to say it is fine. This design was a little bit scary, but also a lot of fun to create. So, when I first started working on this, I thought that the arms would be longer, and so as I was working on it, I was realizing they weren't stretching out quite as long as I thought they would. It's like, is this just going to look like a really big bib? Because it's this square-ish shape. So it's actually a concave pentagon. So the bottom of it is like this, and then there's a triangle cut out. So it's like 3/4 of a square, right? And I've been on this big kick with V-shaped wraps. So with the shaping like this at the neckline, because I really love how I can just sort of throw them on and they stay put. Let me see if I have enough room here. Whoop, to stand up a little bit. Yeah, it cuts me off a little bit, but that's okay. All right, so this is just thrown over my shoulders, right? And because it has this cutout here, it it hangs like it. You can shimmy and move around, and it doesn't slide off like some shawl shapes will. Now, I polled my Facebook group community recently and asked them about their favorite shawl shapes, and it was hands down rectangle. And don't worry, I've got something coming for y'all early next year. But personally, I feel like rectangle shapes just sort of swallow me up. Like, I'm pretty petite, I'm short, I'm only 5 feet tall, and that's with shoes on. So when I put on a rectangle, a big rectangle, and I try and wrap it around, it has to be long enough that I can make it stay put, or I've got to have a good shawl pin or something like this. But with these different shapes, I can put it on, and like I've got a lot of fabric here that I can wrap around me if I need to, like if I get really cold. So this is a nice shape for me. Now, if we switch it over, oh, hi Tove, thank you for joining me. So let's flip it around and I'll show you how I style it going forward. So here we have the big kind of square part rectangle in the back. And so you can just like wrap it around all the way and keep this whole bunch in the front. I need to just get rid of my chair, right? All right. So you can keep this whole bunch in the front if you want to. And that would be fine if you're wearing a coat or something. You want to put a coat on over it, and then you've got all this to keep you warm right here. But I really like to take, usually over my non-dominant arm, I'll take and tuck this tail under, and then I'll put this over my shoulder like this. And then I still have my right arm free to move around, and I really like that. And you can also take this over the top, right? Thank you, Tove. So I can pull this down. I could tuck this side in if I wanted to, right? And then just have this corner here. And then you can even take this part and like tie it in a little knot if you wanted to make it a little bit shorter. So these are the two ways that I find myself wearing it most often. Like I said, I like that it comes down here over my left arm. It keeps me a little bit warmer. But then I still have this arm free to move around. So I've been wearing this a lot. And that kind of surprised me because I'm not much of a shawl person, but I don't have to fuss with a shawl pin using a shape like this because it stays put a little bit better than a regular rectangle or triangle does. At least on me, it does. So yeah, that's the two ways that I typically wear it. And it's pretty simple. It's mostly comprised of double crochets and single crochets. We alternate those so that you get variance in the stitches a little bit so that it's, especially if you're working with stash busting, like you're working through your stash. I'll come back to that in a little bit. But that way you get some wider stripes and narrower stripes, and so it makes the colors flow more nicely, having that variance in between there. So what we do is we start out with a foundation double crochet, or you can skip it. You could do a chain and then work into the chain, and that gives us a teeny tiny rectangle to start with, right? And then what we do is we take this rectangle and we work in a mitered square. So on 3 sides, not just 2. Most mitered squares, you only go back and forth on one corner, right? But this is going to go all the way around that rectangle. So actually, here, like this. So you work your foundation, double crochets, and then you work this way and then back this way. So you work back and forth across 3 edges. And then at the corners, you do increases, right? So you just do multiple stitches in the same spot. And then at these corners, so like this would be where your tails grow, and then this would be, so like this, the way I'm wearing it, right? And then you do increases here as well, but I use a chain 2, and that gives you, I don't know if you can really see it here. It's kind of obscured because of the stitches. I wonder if I put, no, you can't really see those spaces very well. Anyway, they're small spaces, so they're kind of like, what's it called? I can't think of the right word. It's a knitting word. But yeah, it's these little tiny open spaces along the corners. You can see it a little bit better in some of my testers projects. So definitely go check those out. I have a tester gallery up on my website. And of course, they are in the Ravelry projects pages. And I'm going to be sharing more of those on social soon, probably tomorrow, I think, is the day that I'll be sharing those. So definitely stay tuned for those. They are super fun. So yarn, now this is an ombre yarn, right? So I used 4 cakes of Metamorphosis sock in Starry Night by Malabrigo. And so yes, this is Van Gogh Starry Night inspired colorway, and I really love it. I mean, they've got some other ones that are available, but when I saw this one, I was like, yep, that one, those are my colors. I want this one. And so what I did is I worked with 4 cakes, and so I worked from, let me actually take it off so that you can see it a little bit better. So we start in the center with that little rectangle, right? So right here. And then I worked through 1 cake all the way to this dark. And then for the second cake, I started on the dark side of the cake. So I had to work it, I think I rewound it actually, but you could just work from the outside of it. And so then you work from the dark side to the light side. And then one of these cakes had this much lighter section, and so it came out with this really cool stripe there. And then I switched back to starting with the light side, and I worked from there to the dark, and then I picked up and I started the dark first on the 4th cake and worked through until it was done. And so you get these graduated stripes of color because it gets bigger. So like you see how much I get just from the first cake. And then the second cake, where it goes from the dark to that stripe of almost white, is much narrower. And then the last 2, they just get narrower and narrower as the shawl gets bigger. And that's one reason why this is a great stash buster project too, because you can use a variety of yarns to make it, but it's going to be constantly changing the length of those stripes. And so that makes it more dynamic. One of my testers did that actually. She used blues and greens mostly from her stash, and it turned out beautifully. So can't wait for you to see that one. And then we had a couple other ombre cakes. Of course, it's really fun with the ombre because you get to see that graduation of color. And you can also use different weight yarns. Now this was designed in a fingering weight yarn, which is very small, I know. I used a C hook, which is less than 3 millimeters, right? It's very small. You could do this in a heavier weight yarn, but keep in mind that it's gonna make the whole thing heavier. It's gonna be bulkier. So if you like a bulkier wrap, if you live someplace really cold, then that might be a great option for you. Of course, it would work up faster too because you're working with a bigger hook and bigger yarn. But this one feels nice. Like it's not too heavy. A lot of my bigger shawls are they're just big, heavy. It's almost like wearing a blanket, which sometimes that's exactly what I want. I want to wear a blanket, right? But this one is warm because it's wool, but it's also pretty lightweight, even though it has 4 skeins of yarn. So that's 400 grams. This is not, it's a lot of yarn, but it feels nice wearing it. So yeah, I've been wearing it a ton lately, and yeah, I kind of love it. So that is Stellarium. What else do I want to share with you about this? Does anybody have any questions? Let me check. I don't see any questions there. Thanks everybody for joining though. This is fun. Yeah. Oh, the other thing that I want to say about it is since it's worked from the center out, so I used 4 cakes, but like I said before, I'm short. So if you want a bigger wrap, you just keep going. You don't have to make this any specific size. You can work through 3 wrap or three skeins of yarn and see if that's big enough for you. It was close. I was really tempted to stop at 3 cakes for this one, but I knew that I wanted those tails to be a little bit longer so that I could really wrap them around. But yeah, you could totally just keep going, especially if you're stash busting. Just keep going through your yarn stash and try it on periodically and see if it's a good size. Keep in mind though, when you block it, when you wet block it, which I do recommend, even if you're using acrylic yarn, it may get a little bit bigger. So if you don't know for sure how your yarn will behave, you can always wet block it with your yarn still attached and see if it's big enough. And then if it's not, you can just keep going and then block it again when you're done. Yeah. So, oh, and because the stitches are simple, you could even, if you're stash busting, you could mix and match your yarn weights a little bit if you wanted to. So I wouldn't combine like a worsted weight yarn and a lace weight maybe, unless you are deliberately going for like an open lacy look for sections, which that could be interesting. What if you used like a fingering weight yarn for 1 skein or 1 section, and then you switch to a mohair or something really light like that, and then you'd have this really airy stripe through there, and then you could go back and forth with that. This would also be good for your yarn advents. You could use mini skeins and alternate them with a solid color or a tonal color from your stash. You could do all the mini skeins and then add on however much more that you needed to make it the right size with a solid skein. I think that would be cool too, because you'd have the gradually getting narrower stripes from the mini skeins at the center where it would be the most impactful, right? And then your edging, just to make it bigger, could be a big like neutral stripe of color on the outside that complements your mini skeins. So that would be a fun way to do it. Or you could do all mini skeins and make it kind of like a stash buster project. So yeah, lots of different ways that you could do this one. So if you have any questions, let me know. I will be posting this shortly. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you guys make. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.